Okay. Just pull my agenda up here then. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm just trying to see if I can pull everybody up here. Can you hear me all right? Oh, you can't hear me?
Yep.
Okay, okay, very good. So we have, so I'm going to introduce who we have. We have Member Martin, Member Allen, Member Clark. Who else do we have on here? And Member Allwood. Okay. All right. So, and we have Cassandra is looking after our Secretary Treasurer. Okay, so we'll call this meeting to order. Is there a declaration of pecuniary interest with regards to the members tonight? And just speak up there because I can't. I'm using my phone and using my iPad to see my my script and my planning report. So just speak up if I can't. If I don't hear you. Okay. All right. So then moving on then with regards to, and again, welcome to the public that are following along with us tonight. And so we have the minutes of September 8th Committee of Adjustment. Can I have somebody to move and second those minutes? Just speak up, please, if you can.
I'll move that, Paul.
Okay,
I'll second that.
So that's Member Allen and Member Allwood. Okay. Any errors or omissions in those minutes or any discussion points? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, well, thank you for that. And again, welcome, Dave. It's nice to see you tonight.
Well, we come back once in a while, eh?
We've been missing you.
Yeah. No, it's busy times, man.
Yes. Okay, so I just got to switch out here and pull up my script here for the first file. Just bear with me here for a minute. Okay, so this is for a consent, and this is with regards to the FLESHERTON Park property lot 39 FLESHERTON. I'll read that in when I read the notice here. Okay, so this is our first file, and this is B2420, and it's by 235-3489 Ontario Inc. So this public meeting was called under Section 53 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended with respect to an application for consent file B24-2020, affecting lands owned by 235-3489 Ontario Inc., described as being, well, Park Lot U, XPL 39 FLESHERTON, Park Lot PL 39 FLESHERTON, Part Lot 147-150, concession to NETSR Artemesia, Part 1, 16R9345, Grey Highlands, so there is no civic address assigned. The notice of this public meeting was mailed by standard class mail on the 17th of September 2020 to the property owner and to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, in addition to all agencies and persons identified in the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at tonight's public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the municipality of Grey Highlands to the local planning appeals tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting tonight or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeals tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Any person who's part of tonight's meeting, for this application should send in their full name and address. We do not have a sign-in sheet, so you need to contact the I guess the clerk or the Cassandra with regards to your information. It is important to note that if you wish to be mailed a notice of decision and you do not live within 120 meters of the subject property, you must provide your request in writing to the planning department of the municipality of Grey Highlands. Again, your electronic register does not represent your written request, and staff can provide direction for you in applying in writing for this request of notice. At this time, the municipal planner will explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed consent, read the planning report, and advise any comments received. So Matt or Michael?
It's all me tonight.
Hey, Matt.
Oh,
So the floor is yours.
perfect. The subject 33.7 hectare parcel is a vacant lot that spans the boundary of the FLESHERTON settlement area. 5.7 hectare portion of the lot falls within the northern corner of FLESHERTON. So when I say the northern corner, it's the true north. It's kind of northeast if you're using the Highway 10 as your bearing there. The remaining 28 hectares is within the Niagara Escarpment Plan area. That's to the east of the settlement area boundary. The applicant is proposing to sever the subject lands along the settlement area boundary to create one 5.7 hectare lot that is entirely within the settlement area and one 28 hectare lot that is entirely within the NEP area. So the purpose is then to sever that 5.7 hectare lot. The severed lot will have a frontage of 20 meters onto the dead end of Mill Street. The retained lands will have a lot area of 28 hectares and a frontage of 403 meters on the Grey Road 4. Didn't provide a great high level thing here. So there's no issues from a provincial policy perspective. It's kind of a bit specific for anything in there to relate closely to this application. The county official plan has no issues. They kind of defer to NEP policies in the NEP area. Settlement area policies, they don't have a lot of resolution on those either, so there's no issues there. This does get a little bit complex in our official plan. So the 5.7 hectare portion, that purple portion you're seeing there on the map, is there another map that we can look at with the county? Yeah, right there. That red portion there, the red and green will be in the severed lot. The red is a neighborhood area and the green is employment area. So there's kind of different rules at the OP level for each of those. Neighborhood allows houses and residential development and things along that line. Employment lands are meant for commercial industrial uses, not really supposed to have houses. If you're going to have houses in those areas, they need to be secondary to those primary uses. As a result of that split designation, the zoning bylaw is going to have to address some of that. This needs a zoning bylaw amendment to implement anyway, because you can't really change the frontage and size of a development zoned lot per the provisions of that zone. So it's going to be rezoned to development with another set of dimensions and different specific, well, at least at this point, we'd probably recommend holding provisions for each, a holding provision for the neighborhood portion. I'm thinking 2 different zones. That would allow, oh, my map's gone. The neighborhood portion would allow them, it would still have a holding provision. They'd be able to put a house though in that area, subject to applying for a lift to hold that kind of addresses concerns around further developing that lot, because we can kind of probably fit a few lots in there if services or a real plan of subdivision were to go in. And then the green portion, the employment lands, is actually subject to site plan control as per the OP. So it would have a different holding provision, and it would kind of just sit there until someone came with a proposal to appropriately rezone the lot for whatever it is that they're proposing. That's kind of the idea there. In terms of comments, Grey County commented, provided positive comments received from the Conservation Authority regarding the significant woodlands and the stream. They have no concerns with the subject application. Grey Salvo Conservation Authority, generally no objections, as they're not anticipated to negatively impact the regulated area, natural hazard, or significant natural heritage features. Niagara Escarpment Commission, there was a, I can't remember the exact term, but a conditional permit essentially as part of the planning report that was submitted from them. They also provided some comments when I was writing this report, just to say they still have no issues with the consent. Building services advise that any future development will require a building permit and must be in conformance with all applicable law in place at the time of the permit submission. Public Utilities said they have no concerns. Note that the property is outside the current serviced area of FLESHERTON, so I'm assuming that means the sewage doesn't extend to there. Again, it would be addressed later on anyway. Legislative Services had no concerns, and Great Highlands Emergency Services had no concerns. So provided that the appropriate provisions are included in the implementing zoning bylaw, planning staff have no concerns with the subject application and are recommending it be approved.
Okay, Matt, thank you for that. And but basically, it's being severed off the areas that's part of the FLESHERTON settlement, and the rest is NEC lands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to go to our committee first to see if there is any questions. Any questions to the planning report from our committee? I'm sort of scrolling through your hands. I don't see any questions at this time. Okay, thank you for that. At this time, the committee will hear any presentation by the applicant or their agent. Cassandra or Madam Clerk, is there somebody here wishing to speak to this file? I see Ron Davidson has a report in here.
Yes, there is. The agent is in attendance, Ron Davidson, and I will just give him permission.
Okay, thanks, Cassandra. Thank you for that. I know the last time I think we had trouble phoning in for Ron, so. That was, the clerk is the operator here, but *6 and *9. I don't know if that's the same.
Sorry, we have Ron Davidson has his hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Ron, and welcome. Take yourself off mute there. Welcome, Ron.
There we go. Good. Can you hear me well?
I can.
Excellent. Good evening, folks. I shall keep this very brief. There is a fair amount of pre-submission discussion that went into this application before we filed it. So there was really no surprises here, I think, from your planning department's end. One thing, though, we did, because we're severing off Niagara Escarpment Commission lands, we did have to go through the process of getting a development permit from them first. So it's kind of a duplication of processes here, but nevertheless, it was approved. As you heard from your planner, there are no concerns. Simply what the owner wants to do is put back what was originally 2 lots along the exact same lot lines. There is an interested party in the urban lands, and he's happy to dispose of the lands to that interested party. And yeah, the rest of it seems to make a lot of sense. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Ron, I'll just, before you leave I'm going to see if there's any questions from the committee.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. Is there any questions to Ron with regards to the report or with this application? Member Martin?
Thank you for that, Ron.
Good evening, Member
How are
Mark.
you?
Good, thanks.
Good. So your planning report referenced the final vegetation preservation plan. I didn't see that mentioned anywhere else in the NEC documents or anything like that, and I just wondered if you would recommend that we make that a condition, or how you want us to address it, if at all.
No, I'm sorry, where did that come up?
It was in your report. Hang on, I'll find
Do you have
it.
a page number there?
1, 2, 3, page 3, 3rd paragraph down.
And it made reference, sorry, it made reference to a
Final vegetation preservation plan.
sure. So if that was to occur, if we're talking about development on the Niagara Escarpment lands, that could be a requirement in terms of getting a permit from the Niagara Escarpment Commission. I do not think that would be necessary in the urban boundary development in there.
Because
But didn't
it's
you did you not just say that you already had a development permit from NEC?
Well, they're called conditional development permits. So they stipulate on the conditions what needs to be done. In this case, I'm just looking at it now, conditions of approval. There are 14 conditions that have to be met before they can get a building permit on the parcel outside of the urban center. And yeah, that includes, I'm looking at them right now, a final grading site plan. Oh yeah, here we go. A final vegetation preservation plan is condition number 12. So yes, it is taken care of through the, so when Mr. When the current owner, Mr. Bauman, goes and applies for a permit, a building permit to build a house on the retained parcel, which is the NEC lands, he will have to meet those conditions first from the NEC.
And that would happen whether there was a severance or not. If he was still in the same location, they would still require that.
Absolutely, 100% correct.
Right.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification on that.
My
It's
pleasure.
a good question. It's a good thing to raise. Okay. Thanks, Ron. And thanks for the question there, Member Martin. Any other questions from committee members? Just flipping through here. So I'm going to go back to the conditions, but I'm going to go to the public first. So just stay there, Ron, and I'll come back to you in a few minutes.
Okay.
At this time, any person present wishing to object or support the proposed consent, please indicate and state your name and address. Is there anybody online that wishes to make a comment to this report, the severance? Cassandra?
There's no one in attendance that wishes to speak.
Okay. Okay, then I don't need it. So then I'm going to go back to Matt. Matt, can you read then the conditions of this consent for the record? And I want to make sure that Ron is aware of those conditions if he has any questions to those, okay?
Yeah, sure. And Cassandra, please jump in if I've got these phrased incorrectly. Consent application B24-2020 to be approved. This is the recommendation, subject to the following conditions: payment of any municipal taxes, payment of the $300 approval fee, payment of the parkland dedication fee, the applicant to obtain an entrance permit from the municipality of Grey Highlands Transportation Department if required, the applicant to obtain a zoning bylaw amendment to implement the consent.
Thank you, Matt. And to the committee members, is those conditions satisfactory? I don't hear anything. So, Mr. Davison, do you agree to those conditions?
I'm sorry. Yes, I fully understand, and I will add that we have already filed the zoning bylaw amendment application.
Okay, thank you for that. So then going back then to committee members then, is there any further questions from committee members? Okay, so then the position on this application, it is for a consent. And as the committee members know, there are three choices. So I'm going to go down the list then to Member Allen, your position on this application.
I support the application with the conditions as read.
Okay, thank you. Member Clark?
Yes, I support the application with the conditions as read.
Okay. Member Allwood?
I support the application with the conditions as read.
And Member Martin?
What, the application with the conditions as read.
Okay. And I also support the application to the conditions that have been read out, subject to a 20-day appeal period from the time it is mailed out. If there are no appeals during that time, Mr. Davison, then you may proceed with the conditions that are laid out along that you said you've made application for the rezoning already. So your application has been supported and is carried. And thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.
Okay. So going on to our next file, just bear with me here as I go through here. It's item 5.2 on our agenda. And this is with regards to A08 2020, and it's a minor variance. And I'm going to go to the regs here. Just bear with me here as I flip back and forth. Okay, so this public meeting, so hang on, I got the wrong one here. Just bear with me here. Here we are. This is A08-2020. This public meeting was called under Section 45 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended with respect to an application for a minor variance file A08-2020 affecting lands owned by Robert Hagerman and described as being legal description as Lot 3N/S Kincardine Street, Part 10, PL 10 Artemisia, Grey Highlands. Civic address is 173 Kincardine Street, Priceville. The notice of this public meeting was mailed by standard class mail on the 17th day of September 2020 to the property owner, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, in addition to all agencies and persons identified in the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the minor variance is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the municipality of Grey Highlands to the local planning appeals tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at tonight's public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the minor variance is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeals tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. It is important to note that if you wish to be mailed a copy of the notice of decision and you do not live within 120 meters of the subject property, you must provide your request in writing to the planning department of the municipality of Grey Highlands. At this time, the municipal planner will explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed minor variance, read the planning report, and advise of any comments received. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property has an existing house with a front porch that spans roughly half the width of the house. The applicant wants to remove the existing porch and replace it with a covered porch that spans the entire width of the house. The existing porch already encroaches into the 7.5 minimum front yard setback, meter minimum, sorry. The new porch effectively constitutes a new structure and therefore needs to comply with the minimum front yard setback or obtain relief from the requirement through a minor variance. The application notice states that the request is for relief from the minimum front yard setback requirement in section 7.1.2 of the bylaw. So when the applicant initially applied, that's kind of what we had in mind as I was reviewing this. It kind of came to my attention we'd be giving general relief to the front yard setback of X meters, potentially allowing them to put, whatever there. So I've suggested that it be phrased as a relief from section 5.8, yard encroachments permitted. So that specifies in the bylaw how far a deck or something can encroach into the minimum front or any yard setback. It normally only allows 1.5 meters. This will need a total of 4.2, and then that way it's specific to something like a deck encroaching into that setback. So it'll permit the exact same thing that's desired here, and it ensures that it'll only be used for something like a deck. So the purpose and effect, the proposed variance seeks relief from Grey Highlands zoning bylaw 2004-50 to permit the construction of a covered porch. The requirement, I'll read it out here, section 5.8, every part of any yard required to be provided in any zone shall be open and unobstructed by any structure from the ground to the sky, except that unenclosed porches and steps and so on may project into any required yard or setback a maximum of 1.5 meters, provided that the structure essentially is not more than 1 meter above grade. So that matches the scenario here. The exception is that where the required setback is only 1.5 meters, then the permitted encroachment shall be limited to 1 meter. The proposed relief would be unenclosed porches and steps may project into any required yard or setback a maximum of 4.2 meters, provided that such uses are not more than 1 meter above grade. So the foretest, the minor variance, is it minor in nature? Is the request desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure? Is the request maintaining the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? And is the request maintaining the general intent and purpose of the official plan? So being minor, I went out and checked out this property. I mean, the deck's already there, half of it at least. It's going to be a nicer deck with a top on it. It's not even as far as I think it's an old church that was up the road. I can't totally remember, but everything, Priceville's kind of old, so stuff was kind of built out to the sidewalk, it looked like back then, before we had setbacks and whatnot. So I think it's pretty in keeping with what's already there. It was very minor in my opinion. It's appropriate for the surrounding area and for what already exists there. It generally maintains the intent of the bylaw. No structures being moved closer to the road like the actual house. It's just a deck that's already there. And it's more than compliant with the official plan. Grey County Planning and Development had no concerns with the subject application. Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority noted that there's no floodplains, watercourses, shorelines, wetlands, valley slopes, or other environmental features of interest to the SPCA or to in the interest of their agreement with us to review our natural heritage policies. In their opinion, the application is consistent with the natural hazard and natural heritage policies of the PPS, the Grey County Official Plan. Additionally, the property is not subject to their regulated area under their Conservation Authority Act, and there's no permission from them required for building. Building Services noted that a building permit would be required for the proposed work and must comply with applicable law placed at the time of the permit. They otherwise had no concerns. Fire and Emergency Services had no concerns. Public Utilities had no concerns. Council and Legislative Services had no concerns. And in conclusion, planning staff have found the proposed development meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and are proposing the application be approved.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Planner Rapke, and I'm going to go to our committee members at this time to see if there's any questions. So stay tuned there. Any questions from committee members? Well, Matt, you must be doing such a great job. You've topped everything, right, on all your reports there. So that's good. All right, we'll stay in line. There may be some other questions here. At this time, the committee will hear any presentation by the applicant or their agent. Madam Secretary Treasurer, Sandra, is there anybody online wishes to speak to this application?
I'll just remind that if anybody would like to speak to this application, please raise your hand and I can allow you to speak. Nobody is on the phone during this meeting, but if you are on the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand.
Okay, I'll give it a second there, and I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Nobody
so then
has indicated that they wish to speak
to the application. Okay. Well, then I'll say the next line. Any person wishing to object or support or ask questions to the proposed minor variance, please indicate and state their name and address. Is there anybody else from the viewing public wishes to speak to this file?
Again, no one has raised their hand to speak to this file.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary Treasurer. And any further discussion on this proposed application for minor variance from the committee members? Okay, I don't see or hear anybody speaking. So this is again for a minor variance. There is no conditions as it being a minor variance. So your position on this application for a minor variance, getting tongue tied there, Member Clark.
I support the minor variance.
Okay, Member Allwood.
I support the minor variance.
Okay, Member Martin.
I support as well.
Member Allen.
I support the application.
Okay. And I also support the application that meets the 4 tests of a minor variance, subject to a 20-day appeal period. If there are no appeals, then you may proceed with the application as been carried, and you may proceed with the building permit. So again, 20-day appeal period. If there's no appeals, you may proceed. And thank you for that application, those that are watching for this file. All right, so the next one is A09-2020. And I just got to pull out the right attachment here. Okay, This public meeting was called under Section 45 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended, with respect to an application for a minor variance, file 09-2020, affecting lands owned by Nicholas Zgraja and Megan Vito, and described as being legal description, part lot 25, concession 7, EUPHRASIA, part 2, 16R 4916, Grey Highlands, civic address 805759, and I hope I pronounced those names correctly, because I apologize if I haven't. This notice of this public meeting was mailed by standard class mail on the 17th day of September 2020 to the property owner and to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, in addition to all agents and persons identified in the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the minor variance is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the municipality of Grey Highlands to the local planning appeals tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the minor variance is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeals tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. At this time, the municipal planner will explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed minor variance, read the planning report, and advise of any comments received. Planner Ruppy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject lands are nearly 10-hectare property northwest of Rockland on the 25th Sideroad. Let me turn my light on. Sorry, the sun's setting. Roughly a third of the property is wetland, a third of the property is forested, and a third of the property is grass with planted conifer trees that are starting to get fairly big. A single detached dwelling already exists on the subject property. The proposal is to construct a detached garage in front of the existing dwelling next to the existing driveway parking area. Grey Highlands zoning bylaw does not permit an accessory structure to be built nearer to the front lot line than the main building, except in certain circumstances. Mostly your zone being rural or agriculture, and I think the minimum is 15 hectares being the property size. The applicant has plans to expand the existing dwelling and wants to avoid placing the garage on the septic to the east of the residence and on the well to the west of the residence. Other portions of the lot that permit an accessory structure are nearer to the wetland feature and disrupt the usability of the lot. The proposal is requesting relief from the bylaw to permit the construction of this detached garage in the front yard. It should be noted that a holding provision is applied to the subject lands due to the proximity to a wetland. The applicant has submitted a separate application for a lift of hold. Through the review of that lift of hold, the County and Grey Sauble Conservation Authority also identified that there's karst mapping on the subject property, which also imposes a holding provision. Lands with map karst features are I just said that. The requirements around development on karst must also be addressed and will be controlled through the lift of hold process. The subject minor variance, so what we're dealing with tonight, only pertains to the location of the garage being nearer to the front lot line. So the aspects that will be addressed by the lift of hold will not be addressed by this application, and we shouldn't consider those during this decision. If we grant this tonight, he still can't build his garage until the hold is lifted anyway. By getting this variance, he then knows where he's permitted to build the garage, and then it helps with the addressing the karst issue as well and digging the test pit. So it's kind of important that we do this step first. The proposed variance seeks relief from the municipality of Grey Highlands zoning bylaw to permit the construction of a detached garage. The applicant has requested relief from section 5.6 accessory uses of the bylaw as follows. Subsection, I don't know how to read Roman numerals, but IX, be built closer to the front lot line within the front yard than the main building. There's 4 tests of minor variance that were reviewed for this application. Is it minor in nature? The proposed type of structure is in the given zone, the A1 zone is permitted in the front yard if the lot size is 15 hectares. So this is under that, it's 10. There's not really a discernible difference between permitting this in a lot of this size versus one that's 15 inherently. This property is like a fortress of trees. You can hardly see anything from the road. So, and in terms of a form perspective and not looking nice from the road, not a concern whatsoever. I found that it was a minor relief based on that. Is it appropriate for the use of the land? Again, he's avoiding the septic and the well that exists, staying away from the wetland features right near the existing built-up garage area. In my opinion, it was desirable. And is it maintaining the general intent of the zoning bylaw? Again, back to it being permitted inherently on other properties with this zone of marginally larger properties. It's way back from the road. It's beyond the minimum setbacks that are required for accessory structures or for buildings in that zone. So I found it maintained the intent of the zoning bylaw, and it more than maintains the intent of the official plan. Comments received. Grey County didn't get around to providing comments specifically to the minor variance portion of this. They did comment on the lift of hold application, noting the karst features. So I'll read that out here. The subject application is considered, again, this is in reference to the lift of hold application, is considered premature until such time as section 7.5 of the OP is addressed. So that's in reference to the karst issue. The county recommends one test hole is dug in the location of the proposed accessory dwelling in order to determine if the karst topography does exist. Further, provided that positive comments are received from the Conservation Authority regarding the natural heritage features on the subject property, county planning staff have no concerns. I did correspond with them a bit through email. They had no concerns, even approving this ahead of the lift of hold. They didn't submit anything formally though. Grey Stubble Conservation Authority. Subject to the results of the karst assessment, the GSCA is of the opinion that the proposal is consistent with section 3.1 policies. I should also note these comments, they bundled for this minor variance and the lift of hold. The GSCA generally has no objection to the subject proposal as it is not anticipated to negatively impact the Ontario regulated area, natural hazard and or significant natural heritage features. However, if eastern meadowlark are identified on the subject property, the GSCA recommends consulting with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to confirm any potential requirements. Further, the appropriate sediment and erosion measures are applied to ensure no deleterious materials enter the wetland feature. Building services noted, a building permit will be required for the proposed work and must comply with the applicable law in place at the time of permit. The applicant is to ensure the location of the proposed structure and any future development will not impact the existing septic system. Fire and emergency services had no concerns. Public utilities had no concerns. Council and legislative services had no concerns. A neighbor, Robert Herbert, commented, I, Robert David Herbert, registered owner of 805 784 7th line, concession 7. This is his legal description of his lot. He's a nearby neighbor, is very supportive of his neighbors, Nicholas Zgraja and Megan Vito, and their application for rezoning part of their property. And I look forward to receiving a favorable notification upon your decision. In conclusion, planning staff found the proposed development meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and are proposing the application be approved.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Planner Rapke. And any questions from committee members to this file? Member Martin.
Sorry, I let Member Allwood go first.
Okay, Member Allwood.
I agree that the variance seems minor in nature. You can't see anything from the road with the mature trees. But I did notice there were 2 entrances to that property and that the posting was actually on the western entrance, not the existing driveway as shown on the drawing. I'm not sure if that's an issue or not, but
Just going back to the overhead, do you have any comments to that, Planner Rapke?
I'm going to look this map here.
If you want to, maybe just pull it up on the screen if you want.
Yeah.
yeah, it's not really.
One's not a field entrance, would it be considered, would it?
So this, this I believe is the existing entrance. This imagery is a bit dated at this point. So this is, yeah, I don't think this is the main entrance anymore. On the older imagery, it does look like it, but he's changed things. Actually, I don't even know if he has or if it was changed prior. Like this is from 2015. It might even be older than that. I can't remember which layer I had on at this point with this map. But this driveway, from my memory, you had to be past the kind of a wall of trees before you hit the driveway. It definitely wasn't here as the main one.
Because you're looking at the map I see it, it's in green, it says existing driveway. And then if you go further, I guess further to, is that the east?
Yeah.
There's sort of like a grassed, a driveway sort of through a meadow or a lawn or something that you can see from.
Am I sharing anything, or was I just talking and not sharing?
No. Oh, you weren't sharing anything. No, you were just.
Awesome.
So I'm looking at mine. So
I didn't click the final button. Yeah, so here's the existing driveway. From my memory, this is not actually existing. Like there was a kind of had to go past this big dense spot before hitting it. This is kind of an older thing. Did you notice that there was an entrance? I thought the address was here.
The address is on the, I think there were actually two posts with the address on it, but the driveway they're using is on the eastern side of the property. It looks like to me, and the one that's shown here is sort of just goes into the trees. It was hard to discern where it went, but without hiking in there, which I didn't do.
I have a picture on my phone here, and there is a fire number on the one that says existing for sure.
Yeah. That's where it's posted, I think.
Yeah, so I think the applicant's on the call, so maybe they can speak to that a bit.
that's the question. But I mean, if the entrances are existing, one could be a field entrance and one could be, or maybe there's a one summer entrance and maybe there's a winter entrance from snow. That's one thing we do have up here, but we can ask that question, Member Allwood, is when we get to the presenter or the applicant, if you want to hold that then.
Yeah, he's ready. He's got his hand up too, so I'm sure he'll answer.
Sorry, say that again.
He's got his hand up in the attendee thing, so he'll be ready to answer.
Very good. Okay, and I have a question from Member Martin. Go ahead, Member Martin.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rapke, I just wanted to go back a little bit to the karst thing. And if you tell me that we're not concerned about it, and I hear you on that, and I appreciate your opinion on that one, I just want to know what happens if they do find karst topography there in a test hole. Like, then was this minor variance all for naught?
Not totally at that point. There is a second step, though. I think the county might have it embedded in their comments here. So they dig the test holes, and then if the test holes reveal shallow overburden, less than 1 meter in depth, above fractured bedrock, or if broader landform features indicative of karst are observed on the landscape, which, by the way, the Conservation Authority noted they didn't observe that. A study by a qualified individual shall be prepared to assess impacts and mitigation measures relating to the proposed development. Considerations addressed by the study should include surface water drainage, groundwater quality, bedrock erosion, and any anticipated hazard associated with unstable bedrock conditions potentially arising as a result of karst features. The study shall be to the satisfaction of the County of Grey, the local municipality, and the appropriate authority designated under the Ontario Building Code for sewage systems. So that's step 2 after digging test pits to see if there's anything even there, because the mapping is fairly general. I don't know how it was derived, but the OP policies acknowledge that it's general in nature based off some form of evidence, and then the first step is to dig pits to see if that's accurate mapping or not.
See, my concern would be that then that would be conforming to the county's OP. And what do we have at the lower tier level to make it conform to us other than the holding provision?
So our holding provision is in the bylaw, and effectively everything just flows down from the county. Then it's an environmental impact study, or if not needed, it mirrors the county's guidance and flows down to our bylaw, which is kind of how it, if you don't have it in the bylaw, then if the county puts it in the OP and it's not in our bylaw, first of all, our bylaw is not compliant with the OP, and effectively that OP policy has no teeth because it's not applicable law for when someone goes to apply for a building permit. That's only the zoning bylaw. So it has to be in the zoning bylaw in order for the county policy to actually have an effect anyway when someone applies for a permit.
Right, and I follow the train of thought. I'm still just of the opinion that maybe we're doing it out of order, but I can see why you're telling us to do it out of order.
So the issue with doing it the other way is if he doesn't have relief to build in the front yard, then he just digs, well, I mean, I guess suppose he could dig a hole first, but if he digs a hole, goes through this whole study, gets the lift of hold approved, and then committee says, no, I don't want a garage in the front yard, then he kind of did a lot more work than going to committee to get the relief for the garage first.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
It's like that chicken and egg thing, right?
Exactly, that's what I think, but
Yeah.
Fair enough, I can follow the train of thought, so I'm satisfied with that. Thank you, Matt.
Yep. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions then from committee members? I will say, Matt, that was quite an explanation about applicable law and zoning and official plan. You may have to do that one more time at a different time. That was really good.
Thanks.
That sounds like that's the schooling coming out of you there. That's good.
That's a little conversation we had with building when I first showed up, because I was confused about that, honestly. So lessons learned, passing them on.
Well, that's good. That's good. I just want to make a comment that there's two maps on your planning report, the one you showed, and then the one before that shows the driveway a little bit more clearer in the field. If you notice it just seems to be a different overhead, like a different I don't know, different time of the year or whatever.
Yeah, so I have my own application that I built to do maps and whatnot with. It's built on a different platform than what the county uses, and I default, it's kind of like they give you a base map to use and it has a mishmash of dates for aerial imagery, and sometimes I forget to put on the 2015 stuff, so it can be different.
Well, but that just shows the same one, but just shows a little different. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So any further questions from committee members? Thank you, Planner Rapke. So seeing none there, then I'll go back here then and carry on. At this time, the committee will hear any presentation by the applicant or their agent. Madam Secretary Treasurer, is there somebody here wishing to speak to this application?
I believe the owner is in attendance. I'll just remind anybody to raise their hand if they'd like to speak. Okay. And this is Nick.
Okay. All right. Welcome, Nick. If you can hear me. Can you hear me there? I see that you have to take yourself off mute. And I think that's *9. There you are. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
We're doing well. Doing well.
Good.
So do you have anything to add to your application?
Nothing really to add. Matt did a great job of explaining everything in detail. Yeah, I guess just as far as the note on the driveway location, it is a little confusing, but the driveway that we've always ever used is to the west, the one that actually comes in under the trees, where the fire number is located. The previous owners, we are new owners as of 2 years ago, so the previous owners had maybe used that second entrance. And in fact, in one of the photos, I think you're looking at the map, the aerial view there, it looks like a primary entrance. It's actually, I think they used to cut it So the grass was actually, it made it more of a walking trail than anything. We do have a shared field with our neighbor to the east that from the road, we don't actually own any type of entrance to. So I would consider that my field entrance.
Okay.
And yeah, as far as the location of the building, we struggled trying to find a place to put it, the detached garage, based on the reasons that Matt mentioned. The septic tank to the east of the house, well location to the west, and as well as further to the west, the hazard area, which the house is already not encroaching on, but it seems to have been put as close as possible to the hazard. So we wanted to keep away from that, and that's why we are here asking for relief from the bylaw.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. There may be some questions from committee members, just if you don't mind staying on the line. Member Allwood, he sort of explained the driveways. Do you have anything to follow up with your question there?
No, I'm satisfied with that explanation. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other question from committee members to the applicant? Okay, I hear none at this time. So just stay on the line there, Nick. I'm going to see if there's anybody from the public. At this time, any person present wishing to object, support, or ask questions for the proposed minor variance, please indicate and state your name and address. Madam Secretary Treasurer, or somebody else on the line wish to speak?
I don't see anybody else wishing to speak.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Any further questions from committee members to this application? Okay, I don't hear or see anybody. So this application is for a minor variance. And so for this application, your position on this application, Member Allwood.
I support the application.
Okay, Member Martin.
Approve the application.
Okay, thank you. Member Allen.
I support the application.
Okay, thank you. Member Clark.
Yes, I support the application.
Okay, I also support the application. It meets the four tests of a minor variance, subject to a 20-day appeal period. If there are no appeals during that time, then you may proceed with the continuation of your project. This file is carried. And thank you very much, Nick, for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. Okay, so just bear with me then. So our next item is item 5.4, and this is with regards to a consent. And just hang on here. I got these icons to jump up here. Okay, it's for consent, and this public meeting was called under Section 53 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended, with respects to an application for consent file B 22-2020. Affecting lands owned by Noah and Melinda Bauman, described as being part lot 21 and 22, concession 5, OSPREY, Grey Highlands. There is no civic address number. The notice of this public meeting was mailed by standard class mail on the 17th day of September 2020 to the property owner and to all property owners with 120 meters of the subject property, in addition to all agencies and persons identified in the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the municipality of Grey Highlands to the local planning appeals tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeals tribunal, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. At this time, the municipal planner will explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed consent, read the planning report, and advise of any comments received. Planner Ruppy, it's your opportunity to speak to this file.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject lands are located about 4 kilometers southeast of Maxwell. Portions of the subject lands are designated as rural, agricultural, and hazard in the official plan schedules. The lands are a single 82-hectare parcel, and the proposal is to divide the subject land approximately in half to create 2 roughly 40-acre farm parcels. The subject severance proposal was already applied for and given provisional consent in 2017, but the consent expired before the severance was registered. The purpose then is to sever an agricultural parcel of land measuring 41.5 hectares in lot area with a frontage of 500 meters under Road 55. The retained parcel would measure 40.2 hectares in lot area with a frontage of 500 meters onto Road 55. Some things to note on this application, there were some hazard features. There's a lot of farmland too. The Conservation Authority had no concerns regarding any of the hazard features. MDS information was not provided by the applicant, and we didn't really have time to, by the time I was writing this report and notice, to do that. When I drove around, I noted the barns that were there. You'll see, I think I put it in here. I had like a dummy MDS report with a pile of cows. Just running 500 cows, I think, or something, and way beyond what any of the barns there would fit. 300 meters was kind of the setback for that. The closest barn was kind of kitty corner to the southeast of this property, and it was like 200 meters from the property, but the building envelope was about 650 meters from there. This is a really barren road on Road 55 too, so there was not really any issues given how far away everything is from here, in my opinion. Beyond that, from the zoning perspective, it doesn't even need a zoning amendment to implement the consent, which is kind of rare. It's splitting, they're both meeting the minimum size for an agricultural area. They're roughly 100 acres each, 40 hectares. There's one other thing I wanted to note in here. No, that might have been it. I'll read the comments. So the county commented, provided positive comments shall be received from the Conservation Authority regarding the natural hazard, natural heritage features on the subject property, and MDS can be met. County planning staff have no further concerns. The GSCA has no objection to the subject proposal as it is not anticipated to negatively impact the Ontario Regulation 151/06 area, natural hazard and/or significant natural heritage features. The GSCA recommends that the natural hazard area on the subject property be revised to reflect the hazard on the enclosed map through the next site-specific zoning bylaw amendment or housekeeping amendment. Further, if eastern meadowlark or bobolink are identified on the subject property, the GSCA recommends consulting with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to confirm any potential requirements. No concerns from building services, no concerns from public utilities. Council of Legislative Services noted no concerns, but noted the road frontage was the wrong road on the notice, so that's been corrected in my report. Highlands Emergency Services noted no concerns. Planning staff had no concerns with the proposed lot creation and recommend the application B 22.2020 be approved. That's what I wanted to note though. This is ag land, so unlike most severances we process, agricultural severances are a bit more restrictive in what's permitted, but given that these are both 100 acres and generally the minimum size for an agricultural lot, the 200 acre parcel is big enough to sever without any OP or PPS issues in that regard. That's about it.
Okay, thank you, Planner Ruppy. And I was trying to think of the time it was severed before. I thought it was severed maybe the other way before, but I may be wrong on that. But
they had proposed, I think, severing it this way, and then it got revised to this, and then I think they've even switched which is retained and severed, but it's probably the same thing.
Yeah, I know the property. I've actually built hay on it before. So, I'm going to go to committee members. Do you have any question to the planning report? No, I don't see any questions at this time, and we'll get to the conditions as we get on further on this portion. Planner Rapke will have you repeat those a little bit later. Okay, so at this time then, the committee will hear any presentation by the applicant or their agent. Is there somebody here, Madam Secretary Treasurer, that will wish to speak to this application?
I believe the agent for the application is in attendance.
Okay.
And if they'd like to speak, please raise your hand, which if you're on the phone is *9.
Okay. And is there anybody wishing to speak there, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
They have not indicated that they'd wish to speak.
Okay, maybe they'll be there if there's any questions, I presume.
Okay.
Okay. Any person then wishing to object, support, or ask questions on the proposed consent, please indicate and state your name and address. Is there anybody wish to speak to this application from the public? Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No further people have wished to speak to the application.
Okay, well, thank you for that then. Then I'm going to go to you, Planner Rapke. Can you read the conditions of this application, please?
The recommendation is that the consent application B22.2020 be approved subject to the following conditions: payment of any municipal taxes, payment of the $300 approval fee, payment of the parkland dedication fee, the applicant to obtain an entrance permit from the municipality of Grey Highlands Transportation Department if required.
Okay. Any questions to those conditions, or any other questions from committee members? All right, hearing none. So this is for a consent. So your position on this application for consent for B23-2020, Member Martin.
Approve with the conditions as read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Allen.
I support with the conditions as read also.
Okay, thank you. Member Clark.
Yes, I support with the conditions as read.
Okay, thank you. Member Allwood.
I support with the conditions as read.
Okay, thank you. I also support the application to the conditions that have been read. This application has been approved, subject to a 20-day appeal period from the time it is mailed out. Or if there are no appeals at that time, you may proceed with the conditions that have been read out through this report. And thank you for attending that for that application. Okay, so the next one is item B, is actually agenda item 5.5, and it's B23-2020. This public meeting was called under Section 53 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended, with respect to an application for consent file B23-2020 affecting lands owned by Laurie Oliver Moore and Kathleen Ann Moore, described as being Lot 49, Concession 1, SDR, OSPREY, Grey Highlands. The civic address is 309186 Center Line B. The notice of this public meeting was mailed by standard class mail on the 17th day of September 2020 to the property owner and to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, in addition to all agencies and persons identified in the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the municipality of Grey Highlands to the local planning appeals tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeals tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. At this time, the municipal planner will explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed consent, read the planning report, and advise of any comments received. Planner Rapke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject lands are located about 3 kilometers northwest of Badros. The surrounding area is characterized by rural lands with substantial tracts of wetland and hazard areas. While the lands have the rural designation, most of the surrounding area is actively farmed. The property is a 54-acre, 21.85 hectare lot that is characterized primarily with the rural designation in the county official plan, the Grey Highlands official plan, and the Grey Highlands zoning bylaw. A detached dwelling and 2 accessory structures are currently situated in the northeast corner of the lot. The applicant owns and farms several adjacent farm parcels and is seeking to separate the existing dwelling from the farmable land. The initial proposal was to sever a lot of 2 hectares, so 5 acres with a frontage of 90 meters that would include the house and accessory structures. During review of the application, the applicant has requested that the proposal be slightly altered to sever a lot of only 1.6 hectares or 4 acres and 70 meters of frontage to keep more land with the retained parcel. The retained parcel will subsequently have a lot area of 20 hectares or 50 acres and a frontage of around 135 meters. The purpose and effect then is to sever a parcel of land with a lot area of 1.6 hectares and a lot frontage of 70 meters on center line B. The retained parcel will have a lot area of 20 hectares and a lot frontage of, that should have been changed, to 135 meters on center line B. Things of note. So this is kind of a severance of a residence surplus to a farming operation. Typically, you only have to treat one like that when it's in an agricultural area. Otherwise, the severance wouldn't be permitted. It kind of has certain implications for the subsequent zoning and MDS. So you may have noted throughout here, like I addressed the MDS, the applicant collected information from the neighboring farmers, provided it to me. I ran the calculations. There are some potential concerns with the pig barn to the west with a potential envelope on the retained lot. Again, is not intended to be used for building, but it could be. So that can be removed through a holding provision or whatever zoning. It effectively eliminates a potential building envelope, and that concern is eliminated then. At the front of the lot, there's also, again, another concern from the horse barn across the road with potential building envelopes. So through zoning, we can implement holding provisions that then require if a building envelope is to be established, it needs to address MDS and ensure that you can build one. So that has to be done to the retained lot for any severance when there's no building on that lot. The provincial guidelines don't actually require that you do MDS on the house that exists on the severed lot when it's for a severance of a house surplus to a farming operation. So if we treat it like that, you don't actually need to do MDS calculations on that house. So I didn't, and then I second guessed myself after doing this report, so I measured it anyway, and it still complies either way. So the house is far enough away, even though, because it's kind of set back far from the road. So even though the retained parcel at the front area has issues with that horse barn, the existing house doesn't. So MDS for the severed parcel is no concern. The retained has some that can be addressed through holding provisions, which won't be an issue for the intended use anyway. Another thing to note is the wetland features, natural heritage features. The NVCA noted a potential floodplain. Their preference was to keep it all together, but noted that if you use restrictive zoning, it shouldn't be an issue. So again, a holding provision would address any potential building envelope would have to show that it's outside of a floodplain area or there's no concerns regarding those features, which again isn't really a concern for the planned use of the property as an agricultural lot. And that would be addressed through the implementing zoning bylaw. A couple other things to note. So there's no issues from the county's official plan perspective in terms of lot parcel density and lot configuration. Our official plan, for some reason, is a bit more restrictive with the lot density count and the retained parcel. So it says you can have 2 lots per
100.
Yeah, 100 or 40, and then you can prorate up or down, but doesn't provide like a table of guidance of prorating like the county plan does. So I'm assuming here the implication, if it says you can prorate down, you can really only prorate down to 50, that you then allow one severance per 50. And this meets the 50-acre requirement like bang on, so that's not an issue. So I didn't see any issues from that perspective. But it does need a zoning amendment to implement. The severed parcel will be rezoned to rural residential, and then have an exception for the frontage being only 70 meters instead of 100 meters minimum requires. And then again, those holding provisions regarding MDS and kind of floodplain concerns. I should have noted too, actually, yeah, no, I should have noted that the retained lot will need an exception too, because it's supposed to be 150 meters and it'll only be 135, but it's generally there. So that'll all be addressed by the zoning. Comments received. Grey County Planning and Development provided positive comments are received from the local conservation authority regarding the natural hazard and heritage features. County planning staff have no concerns with the proposed lot creation. Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. NVCA's preference would be to have the lands within the floodplain to remain in one parcel. However, the NVCA is willing to consider a larger parcel, but would be recommending that any lands that are located within the floodplain be restrictively zoned to prohibit development, new structures, as our planning and regulation guidelines restrict development within the floodplain to detached accessory structures only on the basis that there's no other alternative on site. In this case, there are alternative locations on site which could accommodate new accessory structures. Grey Highlands Building Services. Building Services has no concern with the proposed severance. The applicant is advised that any new development will require building permits. Public Utilities had no concerns. Council and Legislative Services had no concerns, and Fire and Emergency Services had no concerns. So to conclude, the proposed law creation has the potential to introduce several planning issues that relate to MDS requirements and the potential for new structures to be constructed in naturally hazardous areas on the retained lot. However, the proposal is generally compliant with relevant policy, and we're confident that we can address those concerns by applying holding provisions to the severed and retained lots where required through the implementing zoning bylaw. Staff are therefore recommending that the application be approved with the recommended conditions.
Okay, Matt, thank you for that. And you do have a good map there showing that yellow building envelope that you talked about earlier on that sort of lays that out in a sense of the building envelope. So that's good. Any questions then from committee members to the planning report? Member Martin.
Matt, so you're suggesting that we place a holding provision, or a holding provision is placed on both the severed and the retained?
I would address it more specifically through the zoning amendment. They did have some concerns about the rear of the severed property. I'd have to look back at the mapping and the hazard stuff, but there's like floodplain areas as per their mapping that aren't necessarily in our hazard mapping. So technically, and they might not even be in the regulated area of the NVCA. They might or may not be, I don't remember offhand. But our zoning would then kind of allow it, provided it was outside of the regulated area of the NVCA, would allow you to build something even if it was in a potential floodplain, because we have no trigger to recognize that. So we'll get comments from them on the zoning about where that should be kind of directed towards. And I would imagine it's really the rear of the property behind where the house is. There's kind of an established tree line anyway. And you just put a holding provision on there. It says, if you're building any buildings, you need to apply for the lift of hold and address floodplain concerns, whatever, at the time of application. And then they may never be able to do that, in which case the holding provision then prevents something from being built in that hazardous area.
But for both the retained and the severed? Because the regulated lands fall down that far?
There's a stream that they've almost built the lot line up to. Right. So definitely there would be a buffer of that onto the severed area of at least a little bit for sure. And then the retained definitely, because there's no house right now, right? So
yeah, the retained I can understand. I'm just having trouble understanding the justification on the severed parcel. So
It'd be more for an accessory structure, because technically you could put something back there. I mean, it's not as hazardous as putting a house, but I mean, it can flood and then get weakened and fall down and whatnot, right? And, you know, if they're storing, you know, machines with fuel that then get into water and things like that, right?
okay, thank you.
So just following up on that, Matt, that second building envelope that you've indicated, then they would also have to go through the zoning that would, and that, what would trigger that? So you got the bigger yellow strip because you're past the stream, right? It must rise there.
So the big one, 100%, you're probably not going to get a lift or fault to build there because you have to cross the stream, right? So that would be a big thing to overcome. For MDS, that's primarily for the MDS calculation, because you do have to identify, like, think of all the possibilities of where you could put a building, right, and make sure that you're addressing that through MDS, which effectively we're almost eliminating all of them until it's proven that a building envelope does exist, right, that addresses both of those things, which again is more of a concern when you want to make a building lot, less of a concern here where the intent is not to build anyway, at least for now. So, but we do have to think about possible future instances. Yeah.
No, I understand. No, that's very well described there. Okay, is there any other questions that right this time from members of the committee? All right, thank you. That will get you to read the conditions a little later on the meeting here then. Thank you for that. Okay, whoops, I've lost my, there we are. Okay, at this time, the committee will hear any presentation by the applicant or their agent. Madam Secretary Treasurer, is there somebody here wishing to speak to this application?
The owner is in attendance and would like to speak.
Okay, that's Mr. Moore then?
Yes, this is Laurie Moore.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary Treasurer. Hello there, Mr. Moore.
Hello, Mayor McQueen and members.
Nice. The floor is yours. Do you have anything to add to your application?
No, really, Matt has laid it out quite well. The purpose is that we own 3 lots on one side of this property, 2 farm lots on the other side, and we purchased it to give us everything adjacent and avoid a nice fencing issue and so on. Certainly, we have no intention ourselves of building on the property. We've actually worked the property and have it all sowed down this fall. So our intent is farming, but I understand that, you know, going forward, it doesn't say we're always going to own it, and we have no issue with the exceptions proposed. So basically, that's it from us.
Okay, thank you. I get you to stay on the line because there might be questions, or there might be questions from the public.
Sure.
Is there any questions from the committee members to the applicant owner? Okay, I don't see any this time. Any person wishing to object, support, or ask questions for the proposed consent, please indicate and state their name and address. Madam Secretary Treasurer, is anybody on the line wish to speak to this application?
There's no one else on the line that would wish to speak.
Must be dinner time. Everybody's home eating. Everybody wants to talk, eh?
It is. It's dinner time.
I know. Okay, well, thank you for that. And Planner Rapke, can you read those conditions, please, then?
The recommendation is that consent application B23-2020 be approved subject to the following conditions: payment of any municipal taxes, payment of the $300 approval fee, payment of the parkland dedication fee, the applicant to obtain an entrance permit from the municipality of Grey Highlands Transportation Department if required, the applicant to obtain a zoning bylaw amendment to implement the consent.
Okay. Is there any questions to those conditions from committee members?
I just have.
Go ahead.
I just have one question for the conditions. Is it okay to clarify on the severed and retained lands for the zoning bylaw amendment?
It's definitely for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you got applicant to obtain zoning bylaw amendments.
So it will be so this has to be implemented prior to the consent anyway. So it'll still be just the subject lands, and we'll make sure that the whole parcel is addressed as needed prior to it becoming two.
Okay, but should it, as the secretary treasurer said, consent. So for the consent and the retained, does that hurt to put that in there? Is she saying?
Definitely doesn't hurt. Yeah, we can throw that. Yeah.
Okay.
The applicant, do you want me to read it?
Go ahead. Yes.
I'm making it up because the applicant to obtain a zoning bylaw amendment on both the severed and retained lots to implement the consent.
Okay. Is that okay with committee members? I'm getting the nod. Yes. Okay. It's always good to be clear because that way, because it's doing both. Sometimes farm parcels, you don't rezone the farm parcel, but just the severed portion, but you're adding it to this one as well. So remember, Martin, you look like you got a question on your mind.
No, sorry, I was talking to my son. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, as long as you weren't talking to yourself, that's good. All right. So I see no questions there. And again, Mr. Moore, any further comments from you if you're still on the line? There's a little slight tweak there on the conditions. Maybe he's still on the line or not. I don't know.
Not sure whether you can hear me.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, nothing from me. That's all fine.
Okay, well, thank you very much then.
Thank you.
All right. So to committee members, this is again for a consent. And so your position on this application, Member Allen.
I support the application with the conditions as read.
Okay, thank you. Member Clark.
Yes, I support the application with the conditions as read.
Member Allwood.
I support the application with the conditions as read.
Member Martin.
I also support the application with the conditions as read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I also support the application to the conditions that have been read out. This application has been carried, subject to a 20-day appeal period from the time it is mailed out. If there are no appeals during that time, then Mr. Moore, you will be able to proceed with the conditions that have been part of this consent. Thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so I just got to go back here to the next application is item 5.6, and this is B25 2020. And I just got to pull it up here. This public meeting was called under Section 53 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended, with respect to an application for a consent file B25 2020, affecting lands owned by Joahua Mullin and Rosanna Mullin, described as being E1/2 lot 23, concession 13, OSPREY, Grey Highlands. Civic address is 469,117, Grey Road 31. The notice of this public meeting was mailed by standard class mail on the 17th day of September 2020 to the property owner and to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, in addition to all agencies and persons identified in the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the municipality of Grey Highlands to the local planning appeals tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the municipality of Grey Highlands before the consent is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeals tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. At this time, the municipal planner will explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed consent, read the planning report, and advise of any comments received. Planner Repke.
Thank you. The subject 20.3 hectare parcel is located roughly 4.5 kilometers northeast of Feversham on Grey Road 31. Subject lands and surrounding area are designated as rural in the county official plan. Most of the rural lands in the surrounding area, including the subject lands, have active cash crop operations. The applicant actively farms the subject lands and is proposing to sever the existing house with minimal acreage from the agricultural portion of the lot. It should be noted that during the review of the initial application, Highlands Chief Building Official reviewed the septic records for the subject lands and determined that the proposed building lot configuration would not meet the septic setback required by the Ontario Building Code. The application has subsequently been altered to increase the depth of the severed lot, the one with the house, to ensure that the existing septic is located entirely on the severed lot and that it will be set back 3 meters from the new rear property line that will be established through this severance. Purpose and effect is to sever a rural residential lot with a lot area of approximately 0.9 hectares, a depth of 141 meters, and a lot frontage of 61 meters onto Grey Road 31. The retained parcel will have a lot area of 19.4 hectares and a lot frontage of 139 meters onto Grey Road 31. MDS for this property, there wasn't a lot that I could see through talks with the applicant. He's farmed the area for a while. He rents some neighboring land and whatnot. He didn't know of any active barns either. We talked about some vacant ones to the east. So the farm parcel to the east has some old barns there. That in this map, you can't actually see the exception to the zoning because that amendment from years back never got incorporated into this digital map. And I only figured it out through this process because I was trying to figure out MDS requirements for that barn. And then I found the old amendment and there is an exception there. It should be on the public facing map by now. Actually, I updated that. So there's an exception for that barn. That series of barns actually prohibiting that using them for livestock for dry storage only for those, so those aren't an issue. There's another vacant one a couple parcels to the west. The applicant is very familiar with that, rents the field from that owner. I couldn't get in contact with that owner, but you can tell it's vacant from the road. I ran a vacant barn MDS calculation on that with the size of the barn, and it's well beyond any issues with that. And then there was nothing I could see on the other side of the road. I should note I did mess up the requirement for MDS for not doing it to the severed lot here, because unlike the last one we just did, I believe through my discussions with the applicant, this isn't really surplus because this is kind of his main property. So you couldn't truly treat it as a surplus severance, even though it's for an agricultural purpose. That being said, the proposed building envelope that I measured to on the retained one is equidistant to the barn on the west as the severed lot. And again, it's way beyond anything of concern. So the severed one's not of concern either.
And this is rural lands as well.
It's rural lands, yeah. So things become less extreme in rural areas than in a real ag zone with lots of livestock stuff. So nothing really flagged a big concern to me. It meets county lot dimension and density requirements. I will note again, this being a 50-acre lot, if you prorate down, you get one severance. However, this one doesn't meet bang on the minimum 50 we have. We talked in the planning department and agreed that, I mean, a 19.4 hectare parcel and a 20 hectare parcel are functionally the same thing. So we think this is, I mean, really in line with the intent of that policy, which is to make sure there's a lot of big lots left over if you're doing severances. This is kind of a function of the original survey just being marginally different than other lots. So it's as small of a severed lot as you can get off of an original 50, and he's retaining as much as you possibly can. So we think it's generally complying with that OP policy.
That's why they always that's why they always have plus and minus in there, right?
Yeah. So it will need a zoning amendment. The retained lot, the severed lot will be rezoned to rural residential. The retained lot, again, also needs an exception because of frontage. There's a minimum of 150. It only has 139. So just a little exception there to recognize that. The severed lot will have an exception for the frontage too, being 61 instead of 100. In terms of comments, Grey County Planning provided transportation. Oh, I should mention too that it being on a county road, the granting of the frontage widening to the county will be required. So they mentioned that. Provided that county transportation services requirements have been met, county planning staff have no further concerns with the subject application. Gray Salvo Conservation Authority. GSCA generally has no objection to the subject proposal as it is not anticipated to negatively impact the Ontario Regulation 15106 area, natural hazard and or significant natural heritage features. Grey Highlands Building Services. Again, this is the septic comment in the initial application not complying with that. We've addressed that offline with building services. The comment just didn't get updated. So the lot was reconfigured to have the appropriate depth. Public Utilities had no concerns. Council and Legislative Services had no concerns. Grey Highlands Emergency Services had no concerns. In conclusion, planning staff have no concerns with the subject application and are recommending that it be conditionally approved.
Okay, thank you there very much, Planner Rupke. At this time, is there any questions from the committee with regards to the planning report that was just read out? Okay, we'll have you come back later on to read those conditions then. At this time, the committee will hear any presentation by the applicant or their agent. Madam Secretary Treasurer, is there somebody here representing this application wish to speak?
Thank you. The owner is in attendance,
Okay.
and if he would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Okay, it must be Josh. Are you there, Josh?
He's indicated he'd like to speak. This is Josh Mullin.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh. Take yourself off mute there. There you are.
How are you?
Welcome.
How are you guys?
We're doing well, and you're the last file of the evening, so.
No, I think what we're looking at, is fairly straightforward. Trying to retain as much of the workable land as possible by taking the house off with the unusable acres that are there. So down the, in the future, the farmland stays as farmland, and the house could be severed off. So that's the whole intent.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I'll just stay on the line. There may be questions from committee members or the public, so if you don't mind staying on.
Sure.
Is there any questions from the committee members to the applicant? I don't see any questions. Okay. Anybody wishing to object, support, or ask questions about the proposed consent, please indicate and state your name and address. Madam Secretary Treasurer, is there anybody from the public wish to speak?
No.
Definitely must be supper time. Everybody wants to talk. All right. Planner Rupke, can you go back then and read the conditions, and I'll get comments from Josh after you read it. Go ahead.
The recommendation is that consent application B25-2020 be approved subject to the following conditions. Payment of any municipal taxes, payment of the $300 approval fee, payment of the parkland dedication fee, the applicant to obtain a zoning bylaw amendment to implement the consent. I'll note again, that's on both the severed and retained lots. The applicant to convey a 5.182 meter widening off the subject lands to the County of Grey. The applicant to obtain an entrance permit from Grey County Transportation Services. They actually, if I remember correctly, they just made that one of their requirements in their comments.
So yeah, because there already is there is already an entrance to the house, but there maybe have to be one into the field then, right?
Yes.
And maybe I'll go back to you, Josh. Have you had any conversation with the county on an entrance into the field?
There actually is a field entrance that was, it was always there. And then when they widened 31, the county actually put the culvert in and rebuilt it as well. So.
Okay, I couldn't just remember there. Okay, the conditions have been read. Josh, do you have any questions to those conditions?
No, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further comments from committee members? Okay, hearing, oh, go ahead, Member Martin.
Sorry, the applicant just said that the county road has already been widened?
Gray Road 31 was redone, what, Paul, 3, 4, 5 years ago. They rebuilt.
Well, 2004, I think 2004 it was rebuilt. It wasn't maybe widened, but it was rebuilt and paved.
What happened was the original landowner hadn't conveyed that yet to the county. If you look at the mapping, it's one of the only properties on 31 for some reason. But the original owner also lived in France, so I guess he just never did the paperwork or whatever happened. I'm not sure.
Well, one thing, Josh, that sometimes triggers that frontage is a severance that's there. And so you're triggering that severance for that request from the county. Member Martin, do you have a further comment then?
And the county, I just want to confirm, the county is looking for the widening off of both parcels, right? Yes. Like the entire width or length of the property. Yes. So I just want to make sure that the applicant is aware of that and understands that.
Josh, you're aware of that?
Yep, totally. Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Any other questions into the applicant or with regards to the conditions or anything? Okay, well, thanks, Josh. So then, seeing there's no other questions, this is for consent, and your position on this application, Member Clark.
I support the application with the conditions as read.
Okay, thank you. Member Allwood.
I support the application with the conditions as read.
Member Martin, thank you.
I also support the application with the conditions as read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Allen.
I support the application with the conditions.
Okay, thank you. I also support the application to the conditions that have been read out. This application is carried, subject to the conditions, or sorry, subject to an appeal period of 20 days following the time it is mailed out. If there are no appeals during 20 days, you may proceed with the conditions that has been read out and proceed with the finishing of your lot. So thank you again for attending. Going back to our agenda then, just give me a minute here. I have to keep switching from screens. So we do have, is there any other business to committee members? I think Member Martin, the last meeting, I think you sent, or maybe Cassandra sent out some of the training things that you had experienced, or there was something that was sent out there. I don't know if anybody else had seen that. So I think it was some of the educational things that you had experienced, maybe, Member Martin? Yeah,
there were 3, I guess, of those training videos that I did, and there were handouts from them. And actually, just as a complete side note, you and Member Allen appear in one of the videos that I watched.
Oh.
I could see you. Yeah.
What were we doing?
Well, you were obviously attending the seminar. Oh. And yeah, you had asked a question. I could hear your voice, and then I recognized the back of your head, but that was a complete side note.
There we go. Yeah. And Member Allen was taking it all in, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, that's good. That shows full participation, and when we do attend, we do participate. That's great. And it certainly thank you for that, for sending it for the members that received those. Our next meeting is November 10th. I see on my note here there are 5 scheduled applications. So this is getting back in the heydays of the Committee of Adjustment there, Member Clark. Remember, it used to be pretty busy, and you know, we're a few years back, we were, you know, the odd meeting we were canceling. So things have changed a little bit. So Anyway, I see there's no other business, and I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving weekend. It was great weather, so maybe you guys are still working on that turkey that's left over, and since you had to have a reduced size of people in your household. So I need well, it says the committee of adjustment adjourn until the call of the chair, but I always like to throw somebody on there. Who would like to adjourn? Member Clark, Member Martin, all in favor? That is carried. So we'll see you on November 10th, and you guys have a nice evening. Thank you for attending, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you and good night.
Yeah, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for the
Good night.
planning staff, and thanks Cassandra, and thanks Raylene for organizing this. Thank you.